Australia has won a seat on the United Nations Security Council for the first time in a generation. Opposition leader Tony Abbott joins me now. Tony, good morning to you.
Morning, Carl.
Although you were at first, I think, against this bid, you must be pleased now. It was all worth it.
Look, I welcome the win, Carl. It was an expensive win, and I think it probably owes at least as much to Kevin Rudd as to Julia Gillard. But nevertheless, a win's a win. I welcome it. Let's hope we put the next 2 years on the Security Council to good use.
Gee, Kevin Rudd's been getting a lot of praise this week. You're praising him now.
And look, Kevin Rudd, quite sensibly, has called on the Prime Minister to get away from the gender wars and to focus on the things that really matter to Australians. And this, of course, is what I've been trying to do for the last 2 or 3 years.
How long do you reckon we'd hold on to that seat if you get into power?
Normally, the term is not renewed. It's just a 2-year term, what we won today, at the cost of many, many tens of millions of dollars and some dislocation of our ordinary diplomatic efforts. But it is 2 years that we've now got at this particular top table, and let's hope we can make the most of it.
Let's move on to boat people now. We read this morning you'll be pursuing a fundamental shift in coalition policy. First of all, is that true, and what will that entail?
We're not putting particular time limits on how long people would stay on Nauru, but we are making it crystal clear that it could be a very long time. We have to have a system which has got deterrence built in. That's why we'll have temporary protection visas to deny the people smugglers a product to sell, rigorous offshore processing at Nauru and elsewhere, and of course the willingness to turn boats around where it's safe to do so.
So 5 years, as it is saying in the paper this morning, is not out of the question. We could have these people on Nauru for 5 years. How will that differ from the average stay in detention now?
Well, it's not out of the question, Carl, although obviously we're not putting a specific figure on particular cases prospectively, and we would work very constructively with the Nauruan government there.
5 years is an awful long time, though. You must admit, 5 years in a detention centre, and where are you going to put them all? They'll be stacking up.
And people need to understand that if they get on a boat to Australia, Nauru may not be just a brief detour on the way here. Look, the problem at the moment, Carl, is that we've got the flow becoming a flood. There's something like 2,000 illegal arrivals a month. The numbers are accelerating. The situation is getting worse. Our borders are out of control. The current government has totally lost control of the situation. We've got to say enough is enough.
All right.
And that's what the coalition would do.
OK, so you're shifting directions to an extent. Did you raise all of this with the Indonesian president?
I'm not going to go into the specific details of who said what to whom, but yes, it was a pretty full discussion with President Yudhoyono, and then there was a much fuller, more detailed discussion between Julie Bishop and Scott Morrison and Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa.
Did you raise the fact that as part of your policy, these people may be on the roof for in excess of 5 years, or a number of years at least?
Look, I'm just not going to go into the specific detail, but as you can imagine, we were talking, Carl, about the Indonesian context, the context in the seas between Australia and Indonesia, rather than the specifics of what might have been happening at detention centres elsewhere.
Understand. However, central to your policy is that you will turn the boats back. Surely that was raised with the Indonesian president.
And again, Carl, I'm not going to go into the specific detail because the current government has got itself into all sorts of difficulties by verballing the Indonesian authorities at different times. Suffice to say that the Indonesians very much understand what we're on about, and there is going to be continuing and, I am sure, constructive dialogue between the coalition and senior people in Jakarta.
I'm sure it was awkward. I mean, leadership can sometimes be awkward, especially when you're trying to put your point of view across to someone who may not agree with it. But can you just confirm that you did raise it with the Indonesian president?
Look, we had a very full discussion of the coalition's position. Did we discuss every last detail look, certainly...
Tony, it's not a last detail. To be fair, this is central to what you're doing. You are saying this is going to be the difference between your policies.
And Carl, look, I don't conduct megaphone diplomacy. I don't verbal people. I don't have discussions with the Indonesians for my benefit. They're for Australia's benefit. We've got to stop the boats. After the discussions, first, between myself and President Yudhoyono, second, between Scott Morrison and Julie Bishop and Foreign Minister Marty Natalegawa, they know exactly what we intend, and I think they are comfortable with what we have in mind.
So they are comfortable in most levels of government, certainly at the higher levels, for you to turn back the boats?
Well, they understand that what we need and what we want to work towards is much stronger cooperation between Australia and Indonesia when it comes to establishing maritime security. You see, Indonesia has a vast sea expanse to the north as well as to the south. It has very porous borders, and I think that there's a lot that Australia can do to be helpful to Indonesia, and in so doing, obviously, Indonesia can be helpful to Australia.
Finally, and very, very quickly, the boatload of asylum seekers from Sri Lanka who are heading, or what looks like heading our way, who have been involved in some kind of attack on a fishing vessel, do you think they should be granted protection?
I think it's very important that this matter be fully investigated. And if people look to have committed very serious criminal offences on the way to Australia, well, obviously, people should be treated as those who have committed, or at least allegedly committed, criminal offences.
Tony, always good to catch up with you. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.
Carl, it's a pleasure to be with you, as always. I missed you last Friday, and nice to be with you today.
Good on you, Tony. Go and fix your man cold. So over to you, Georgie.